Today I want to talk about faith, religion, gods, characters' relation to that gods, and how you can use gods as an element of play as the GM, how you can use faith as an element that defines your character as a player. So I wanted to start with an example. That is my LARP character Aikir. He's a Thorwaller. That's the Dark Eye, the Aventuria equivalent to Vikings. And this is his necklace. This is a symbol of his faith, rather the collection of his beliefs. This amulet here is the representation of, is the sign of our group, of his Otayasko, of his shipmates. And he holds that in really high regards. His shipmates are more important to him than his family, more important than his own life even. Then I got this amulet. The mage in our group, our Godi, gave that to him to ward off the mind influence of an evil god Aikir had to make a pact with, so he could come back from the dead to keep on defending and helping his ship group. So he really didn't want to get a pact with this group, but he thought they are all going to die and die really horribly if I don't come back. So this is a representation of that. And I'm not sure if the magic of that really works, and certainly Aikir is not. But he is sure enough that he will have a really bad feeling if I forget to take my necklace with me to a convention. This is just a ship. I thought that would look cool. And last one, this is an Urus rune, a rune of strength. This is just a good luck charm. Now this is a whale's fluke, and that is an amulet representation of Aikir's main god. That would be Swafnir, who roams the ocean in the form of a white whale and is fighting against the world serpent Hranga. And one day when he will win, the waves from Hranga's death struggle will flood the whole world, and only those that have ships will survive. Thorwaller have a really practical relationship to their gods. Long ago, the people, the Thorwaller, their ancestors, made a pact. Swafnir would help them find a new land and survive the threats and survive the dangers of the open water, the dangers of the ocean. And in return, after that, they would come and help him in his fight against Hranga. So it was a give and take. And this relationship to their god is still true for modern Thorwallers. They think of him as a kind of big brother. Usually expect your big brother to help you if you ask really nice. But also your big brother may want something in return. You could hear a priest of Swafnir barter with the god for his help. Now, there are many aspects to this. Let's start with faith. Almost any character, almost any person you will meet in the real world has some kind of faith. It is extremely rare to find a true nihilist. Take me, for example. I'm an atheist. I don't believe in gods. I think there's very little evidence. And I've accumulated a lot of scientific knowledge There's no room in the world, how I understand it, for gods to be in. But that doesn't mean I don't have faith. I've got faith in the scientific method. I've got faith that the world is real, that I am real, and that humans have the capacity to understand how the world works. If I were to believe, truly to believe nothing, I could just sit back and wait for oblivion to come, because there would be really no point at all in me doing anything. The main thing I think everyone believes is that the world actually exists and that they actually exists. This is something that can't be proven by any means. So you just assume these two things to be true. They are an axiom of your faith. And consequently, from there, you build up your whole worldview. That's actually an interesting topic in itself. Depending on what you know, depending on what everyone knows, everyone will have a different world they live in. We can only experience the world through our accumulated knowledge and view it in that framework. We can try thinking outside of this box, but it's really hard. So if you observe a phenomenon, any phenomenon, let's take something we think mundane of today, thunder and lightning, you can only interpret it in what you know, in this framework you're working in. So I know it's a weather phenomenon, it's ionization of the atmosphere, and an equalization of charge between the ground and the clouds above. But if I were to interpret my world through the worldview of old Vikings, I'd say that is Thor throwing his hammer. That is what I know about the world, so I see it that way. I know it to be true. Everyone has this subjective reality, this personalized reality, and if you get information, if someone argues with you about it, you get really defensive about it. You dismiss that information, you dismiss that argument as not real. You don't even want to think about it. I picture myself as a very rational guy, but if I get information that could be proof of God's magic and aliens, I am very ready to dismiss that information as false, as fake, right from the start. I try to be open-minded, but as I said, it's a defensive mechanism of your brain. It's a reflex. That is really hard to overcome. Now, this personalized reality is something we can work with in fantasy gaming, this subjective reality. We as a GM can describe the world in a way how the characters would see it. For example, if you were to run a sci-fi setting, but the characters are some kind of Stone Age people, you would describe to them the machines and aliens and computer intelligence they meet, but through the framework of Stone Age people, through gods, ghosts, ancestral spirits and demons. You could leave hints in there for your players to see through the charade. But for all intents and purposes, you are running a fantasy campaign in a sci-fi setting. Like Arthur C. Clarke famously said, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You could also use it as the very base for your magic system. If a character believes strongly enough that something is true, it will be true in their personal reality, but the magic system of your world could be, it becomes true in the larger reality. Let's call it real reality. The double reality. Let's call it double reality. And then what form their magic takes would differ from individual to individual. You could explain every different school of magic, every different way of magic with just that. It's how they believe magic works, how it was taught to them. So you can have your mages that think magic can be understood like a science, that get their knowledge from books, that use spells. That is how they have learned it, so it is real for them, so this is how they can work magic. But you could also have clerics that pray to their gods every morning and get the power from the gods, and that's how they believe they get magic, how they cast the magic into the double reality. Let's talk a bit about those clerics, about those D&D clerics in particular. In my opinion, they are way too similar to mages and sorcerers and warlocks and everyone else. They get a number of spells each day, and then they can use them in the course of the day as they see fit. I would find it more interesting if these clerics that get their power supposedly from the gods would use a whole other system for using magic, for working their miracles. There is a third-party supplement for Dungeon World, I think it's called the Priest class. These priests use their powers by praying to their gods and pray what they want to achieve. The gods decides, so the GM decides in this case, how the god is going to answer their prayer and influencing the world. So the cleric, the priest, is not directly influencing the world, he's not directly casting spells, but the god is influencing the world and casting the spells and deciding how to do so, answering the prayer of the priest. I think that is a more interesting system. It plays with this relationship between the god and his priest, the priest and his god, and is different from how other magic users use their magic. The Dark Eye tried to make the magic and miracles distinct by using different systems. So you've got astral energy and spells to cast magic with, and you've got karmatic energy and prayers and miracles to use the power of the gods with. But at the end of the day, the systems were still mechanically way too similar. So that was a wasted effort. Now, what about the gods themselves? And fantasy games usually have several gods, have a whole pantheon of gods, good and bad and everything in between. And what these gods are able to do, how powerful they are, varies from game to game, world to world, pantheon to pantheon, and even god to god. So, what is a god? At the end of the day, I think anything the characters believe is a god, have faith in that it is a god for them. In their subjective reality, it becomes a god. But it probably has to be something that is sufficiently powerful to have a huge influence on the world. But potentially a level 20 character is so powerful that a level 1 character could consider him a god. Certainly level 20 mages have reality-shattering spells, and a level 20 warrior would be so much more powerful than level 1 warrior. It's like Hercules walking on Earth. He could take on entire armies by himself. But usually gods are a step above even these 20s level characters. They have ascended beyond the mortal realm. They are, for all intents and purposes, immortal, timeless beings. If you have this pantheon of immortal, very powerful beings, of gods, your plot might become very similar to an old Greek tragedy, where everything that happens on the mortal plane, everything the heroes try to accomplish, is actually just a game of the gods that are using the mortal plane as their playing field, as their game board to settle their internal dispute and patencies. I personally don't really like that setting. If I hear that my character should do something because he gets a vision from the gods, because it's the right thing to do, because the gods want him to, I immediately get defensive. I've got a strong need for independence, for being the weaver of my own fate, for going my own way, and not some god's errand boy, that I tend to be defensive about those things and have my characters try to rebel against that fate and try to find their own way despite the gods pulling the strings in the background. I have played religious characters before, very religious characters. Yeah, I've played inquisitors, priests, and so forth, but usually in a setting where I was pretty sure the gods would not turn up as characters to influence the story. In LARP, it is highly unlikely that the gods or messenger of my gods will ever show up to send me dreams, to speak to me directly and give me quests, because my character is just not important enough, and that is not the kind of high fantasy games I go to. I go to low fantasy games, so gods usually play no part in it. I'm also always very skeptical if the GM introduces dreams and visions sent from the god to guide our ways, to give us quests, to drive the plot forward. Because in my mind, there's no way that my characters could distinguish between a vision sent from their god, true vision, or a dream, a nightmare, a false vision sent from another god, from a demon, from a succubus, whatever. How could my character ever be sure that he's following a vision from his god and not from a great deceiver, and is actually serving someone else's purpose? He's being led astray. And I'm always very annoyed if the other players follow these visions blindly without contemplating that possibility. I wonder if that is because the other players, they have faith that the GM wouldn't lead them astray, wouldn't send them visions from a devil to make the characters do some great evil deed. But as a GM, I totally would do that. If I had a really pious character in my group with a strong faith, I would try to lead this character astray. I would send him visions testing his faith and beliefs and principles. Would he hold true to these principles? Or would he be led astray easily? What would he be willing to do in the name of his God before he realizes he is serving the devil? Faith can be a very interesting, very important element in a character's personal arc. Not only is faith a part of the whole worldview, so if they are changing their faith, they are changing their entire outlook on the world at large, but it has also to do with the character's relationship with his gods. And this relationship can change like any other relationship between characters and NPCs. So you could start with a character that is holding a really strong faith in their gods, but it is a naive faith. That is what they have learned in school. It's not reflected. It's not actually their own faith, but someone else's faith that has been taught to them. Then over the course of the adventure, they experience that the world and the gods are not actually working the way they thought they would. So they get a crisis of faith. And then they have different possibilities where to go with this. They could lose their faith in that god altogether, maybe pick up another god, maybe become a nihilist, a sarcastic asshole. Or maybe they work through the issues and find renewed faith, work up their own faith through their own experiences, and come out with a much stronger faith and connection to their gods. Now, back to D&D and to other role-playing games for an extent. I find that clerics and warlocks are very similar in what they actually are. They're both serving a higher power, a greater power, some powerful beings that gives them power to serve their own needs and the needs of their patrons. And clerics and warlocks are really not that much different. In the past, the distinction mainly came from who they serve. So the clerics would serve the gods, and a warlock would have a pact with some fake horde, with some elder gods or devils from the hells. But in the newest edition, a warlock can also serve one of the gods. And at that point, I really don't see the difference. Or in the Dark Eye, they've got a main pantheon of 12 gods, and they also have 12 demon lords, 12 archdemons that are directly opposed to these 12 gods. So each god would have their own opposite in the archdemons. So for example, Praeus, the god of light, justice and law, would have his opposite in Blakkaratz, the black god of vengeance. The gods would have their priests, their clerics, some individuals they bestow power upon, and after death these individuals will come into the individual god's paradises. And the demons will make pacts with individuals, giving them power in exchange for their soul that will be drawn down to the hells to serve them for all eternity. Now, where is the difference, really? What is the difference between a paradise and a hell? It really depends on perspective. Someone's paradise could be another person's hell, and vice versa. And I don't think that the demons themselves would advertise the fact that they draw down the souls to hell, and neither would the gods. So I find it's all a lot of branding, really, of marketing. I don't see the big difference there. If you promise your soul to a god for an eternity in paradise, or if you sell your soul to a demon, how do you even decide? You can only decide on the knowledge you have, but you don't have direct connection to see through all of the smoke and mirrors, all of the marketing that the gods and the archdemons put up. No one has ever returned from these paradises to give you a first-hand account. You can't try them out for 2 weeks and then decide. That is something that I'm playing with in my The Dark Eye game, that the gods and the archdemons are actually not all that different. It's just how they were perceived very differently for the longest time. But if you really think that something is a god or an archdemon, if you think it is hell or paradise, really depends on your individual outlook, on the individual faith. So one of my players, who is horrible at English and will not watch this video, is playing an undertaker, and he wants to become an acolyte for the god of death, Boron, the good god of death. But I will try to instead have him worship Targunitoth, the goddess of undead and everything that is unholy. I will make it so that he thinks he's doing the right thing. So that he thinks he's actually worshipping Boron, even though he will get spells to summon undead and speak with ghosts and stuff. I'm very looking forward to find out how that all plays out. It should be some very interesting role-playing. That's all I have for today. So, what are your experience with faith, gods and religion and role-playing? Do you have any good stories how you tempted the righteous paladin to follow the path of sin? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.